Hello, welcome to Forest Focus. One of the best things about doing this podcast is getting to meet interesting people from all areas of football, not least academy football, to hear about the next generation of Premier League players. With that in mind, it's great to sit down with Chris McGuane, the current head of Forest Academy, and Nick Marshall, the former head of Forest Academy, to hear how much their jobs have changed, the challenges they face, and where they think youth development is heading. Where shall I start? Former head first. Nick, how are you doing?
I'm good, thank you, mate. Yourself?
Yeah, good. Good to see you. Haven't spoken for a while. Conversation with Paul Hart sparked the idea to do this, but we'll come back to that and Paul Hart shortly. But yeah, good to see you again. Chris McGuane. I asked you how to say your surname. You were very generous in saying either way is good. How are you doing?
Yeah, very well. Thanks, Matt. Thanks for having me on. Really appreciate it, mate.
No problem. Looking forward to it. I don't really know where this is going to go. I've said to Chris and Nick, it'd just be interesting to hear a chat about their jobs and how it all works, where they think it's going, the challenges they face, as mentioned. So yeah, we'll chat about that for the next 45 minutes or so. Nick was the former head of Forest Academy. Now he's the deputy head of Liverpool's Academy. So I mentioned Paul Hart, Nick. I want to hear from both of you just quickly how you ended up where you are in terms of academy football. Paul said something along the lines of he basically plucked you from university and gave you this opportunity. I don't know if that's slightly revisionist, how it all was, but how did you end up in academy football? Was it always the plan or not?
Not really. I always loved football. And at university, doing a sports science degree, I did more work in the football team at university than I did probably my degree, which is not a good thing to say. But I left university and spent a couple of years at Barnsley's academy, working for free as their under 13, under 14 coach, assistant coach, I say. And then the coach who brought me to Barnsley then got a job at Leeds with their under 12s and took me with him. So that was the first paid job I had. And I spent 2 years at Leeds, which is where I then kind of like didn't really get to know Paul. Saw Paul in like CPD sessions because at that time you were allowed to have satellite academies or satellite centres of excellence, as they were called. So I spent most of my time in the week working down at Worksop with the kids from South Yorkshire that were in Leeds' academy. And then I'd only really go to the academy for games on a Sunday. That's when we were at home. So I actually rarely saw Paul. But then at the end of my second year, I got a phone call from him, inviting me down to the City Ground. He'd left Leeds, fully enough, because he was a little bit frustrated that the kids weren't getting in the team. And it was an unbelievable group of players he had. Harry Kewell, Paul Robinson, Alan Smith, Gary Kelly, lots and lots of players, Jonathan Woodgate. And he'd been kind of frustrated that they'd not got in their team. So he left to come back to Forest. He still lived in Nottingham. He always had enormous affection for the club. And his time there as a player, and he invited me down. So he kind of plucked me from university, but not quite university. I'd left and had a few years coaching. I don't think he brought me down necessarily as a coach, although I was running the Centre of Excellence. He brought me down as probably somebody he thought at that time was quite bright. I'm not sure you got that one right. Who could help him with the direction academies were going. So that's how my relationship with Paul kind of started, and my first full-time job in football started. And I had a really enjoyable, the vast majority of the time, 16 years at Forest, and 12 of those as academy director. And that was down to Paul. So he's kind of my mentor, and he's the person who I look up to most in youth development.
He did say you were his best signing in his entire career, including players. So he speaks highly of you as well. What about you, Chris? Do you have that person or that kind of free work, to earn your stripes? How did you get here?
Yeah, not necessarily a person in particular, Matt. I mean, I got in very young. I started helping out my little brother's grassroots team at 15, 16. Ended up spending a little bit of time abroad in America, which was popular, probably 15, 20 years ago. You'd go out and spend a year over there, which unbelievable experience at the time as a young lad. Came back and got involved in the community scheme, in what is now obviously like the community trust, what was back in the day football in the community. That was at MK Dons, who had just transitioned, moving across from London into Milton Keynes. And then started my academy journey from there, working as a casual part-time age group coach. Really enjoyed it. started to run the club's development centres, elite centres, so the tier below the academy, and then was lucky enough to move on to Watford in a purely coaching role, technical coach. That quickly progressed to assistant academy manager. Nick Cox then moved on as academy manager into obviously his role at Sheffield United, and I was fortunate enough to be offered the chance to go and become the academy manager at Watford at the time, and then left there 6 years ago to join Forest, and obviously now probably 18 months into the role of head of academy, obviously having previously assisted Gary Brazil when he was here as academy manager. So didn't go to university until only 4 years ago, where I completed my first master's in sport and directorship. So kind of came out of the normal traditional school route and very much went into coaching, and had a vision early on. I was going to be first team coach, first team manager, and then quickly got a passion and fell in love with kind of the youth development side and developing players, and have obviously never looked back from that day, really.
I'll ask Chris how much the Forest Academy's changed. I don't know if Nick's been back in a while, but how much has it changed in general, Nick, the world of academy football? I know you work at Liverpool, which is the pinnacle, I guess, of it, but just in general, how much has the whole world of academy football transformed in I don't know how long you've been in it, 30 years?
1992 was my first year. I feel really old now. Jeez.
Sorry.
97 at Forest. So, yeah, it's changed a lot since those days. And I guess one of the biggest changes is really the investment in youth development. So when I first started full-time at Forest, there was Paul, Steve Wigley, myself, a bit of a legend at the time called Mel Hackett. There was a physio, kind of had a part-time psychologist. We were one of the first people to have a part-time psychologist, and we had a part-time fitness coach, which is really ahead of time, really. So we didn't have that many staff. So the biggest change really that I've seen is just the number of staff in academies down to the influx of investment, which is in many ways a really good thing. But I often describe to staff at our place now, it's a lot harder, I think, for younger, inexperienced staff to come into an academy these days than it was then. So when I started, I was kind of surrounded by people that had been in the industry for a long time, have been coaches, have been players. They kind of got it. I had some people who played, obviously, either been at Forest for a long time in a staffing capacity, or had played in the past. Both Steve, and who was also very helpful for me, by the way, and Paul Hart had played for the club. So I was kind of like the new, inexperienced rookie, as it were, surrounded by people who had been in the industry a long time. So now it's the opposite, really. The experienced people who have been in the industry a long time are surrounded by loads of people who are quite inexperienced and new. And that's one of the biggest changes. So although there are opportunities because you can get more staff in to do more things and help them, it also means the players are getting a lot more messaging. Maybe that message isn't quite on point. I got very quickly put into line by Paul and Steve if my messaging wasn't on point, if we weren't together in the way we spoke to the players and what we spoke to the players about. So it was very clear for the players. I think that's a big change. And then obviously the facilities. So where Chris is sat now, that was a local council-run place that me and Steve just went down to hire for a half term. And the lady who sat behind reception said, "I'm surprised you don't want to buy this place." So we went from my first year at Forest going down to Bingham to just desperately trying to find somewhere to hire some AstroTurf pitches, because we had nothing when the lights went dark, and we were training basically next to a sewage works in the summer. This is the schoolboy program. Obviously, we were down the Trent training down there with the U team and playing at Highfields. So now, obviously, the facility that Chris has sat in, which is just a world away from what it was then. So the big change has been massive, the number of staff involved, and the facilities are a lot nicer. There are lots of other things as well. Obviously, it's a long time ago, but they've been the main two things I've seen.
What's paint a picture of the Forest Academy now then, Chris, in terms of staffing numbers, and also does it present challenges then around? I'm not saying coaches are going to hide, but can they not get to the forefront if you've got so many of them, and can the messages get mixed as well?
I think as long as you've got a clear structure and philosophy and way of working, and everybody's aligned to that, you can keep the message really, really, really strong. I think Nick's point spot on. The investment and what's gone on around the game and youth development academies has been massive, and the support that now is there for players, probably back from, I mean, Nick's obviously been in youth development a lot longer than I have, but you tend to have a real small group of staff around, the players, whereas now you've got the coaching staff, you've got the wraparound care from your safeguarding, your player care, your nutritionist, your analyst, your performance staff. There's a number of people who can work with the players, and as long as everybody's aligned and key, with the message and what they're working on with that player at that given time, then you can see some real good returns and some real good outputs off the back of it. It can always be a challenge. I think the nature of the industry in the world we're in is ever changing and is ever moving all of the time. So the challenges are always there. The way children and young kids now learn and take on information is completely different from what it was maybe 10, 15 years ago, with the explosion of technology and social media and being on their, probably being on their phones and tablets and iPads more often than not now. So the way we teach and the way children learn, that's a challenge. But in terms of where you're at, and you can get, if you've got the right people and the good of people, and that wraparound care is there, then you're definitely you're on the right tracks to make the progress you need to.
Chris has led into one of the big things I wanted to ask you both about there around the kids themselves. Just before that, a quick word for the Trent Navigation, just a 30-second ad, if you'll just bear with us, and we'll see you on the other side of that.
And not just great beers, but immaculate inside. Cobs on the bar. What more do you want? I would say it was well priced as well. And then, obviously, as you know, the big shed outside and what they've done on match days is phenomenal. That's become, when I first started going, as a kid, I never really heard of the Trent Nav as like a big place to go. And then the last few years, it's really grown in stature as a pre-match place to go. I love it. And I love the fact that it's on the way to the ground. And I just love everything they've done with it. It's great.
Played the wrong advert there, but anyone who watches this regularly will know that's the kind of thing I do all the time. But it was the Trent Nav, so that's okay. And thanks for their support as ever. Right. So one of the big things I wanted to ask you about was about the kids themselves. And Chris mentioned social media there. I remember asking you, Nick, a while ago about social media and things like that. And I was coming from the point of kids reading about themselves and not getting down. But I don't know, it feels like the Wild West now. I'm speaking as much as a parent here now. I know we've all got young kids. My daughter's going to senior school next year. How do you, as an academy, deal with, kids can read absolutely anything on social media now, especially young boys. How do you deal with that? Or do you not deal with that? Is it the domain of the parents and their schools to deal with the challenges that presents and just stick to the football? What's the whole philosophy for you guys at Liverpool? Then I'll ask Chris the same question.
It's education, isn't it? That's the only thing you can do, really. So we're very fortunate. Obviously, the club itself has got a huge social media imprint in terms of the number of people that are following it on Twitter and YouTube and all. I shouldn't call it Twitter anymore, X, and all those different sites. So we have lots of people who work for the club. So we get those in to educate our parents as much as we can. We also have drop-in sessions. So we did some drop-in sessions just before Christmas to help them in terms of understanding how they're interacting with social media. That can sometimes be on Xboxes and PlayStation or what have you, and making sure that the controls are set up correctly so that people who perhaps shouldn't be getting in touch with the kids are getting in touch with the kids. But it is absolutely the Wild West out there. Sounds like we've all got kids kind of around that age. So I have a 11-year-old who's just gone to senior school, and it's something that we constantly speak to our boy about. And often get into a little bit of argument because he's frustrated that we won't let him have this one and won't let him have that one. And every different parent has a different kind of view on it. We try and use little statements like, ballers have Instagram and footballers have careers, which we nicked off a ex-member of another football club quite close to us, which we quite liked. So it's subtle messaging to the kids, but it really, look, nobody's got it cracked. It's obviously very prescient at the moment, very current at the moment with Adolescence out as the film and the TV series and Gareth's chat that's going around at the moment that people should definitely watch. And I don't think anybody has the answer. The only thing we can try and do is educate the parents in particular and the children who also get education sessions, which I'm sure happens at all the clubs, Forest included. That's the only thing we can try and do and steer them and give them role models to follow as well. But it's a really tough area. Father of a young person as you both are, it's a slightly worrying area as well.
Massively. Nick referenced Gareth Southgate's speech there about adolescent men and things like that, young boys. So definitely take that out. So what about you guys, Chris? How do you view it?
Exactly the same as Nick. Really, Matt. I think it's very much about trying to educate the players and the parents and try and use it in the most positive way that they can, and not kind of get yourselves into any scenarios or situations that could create them a problem. We put on those, Nick spoke about that kind of the drop-in sessions and the education sessions and something as simple, we've probably all been guilty of it or seen it on Facebook pages or Instagram when, our children start school and we post a photo with them in their new uniform outside the front of their house, which has got the name and number of your house on, and, little things like that, which, we see all the time. And it's just educating the parents around, straight away, people that you don't know have got access to where you live. You can type in Google and check an address. So very much trying to use it in a positive way. And I think one of the big challenges with kind of social media and that side of it is keeping up. Nick referenced there about they talk to each other and playing Xbox games now and different apps that come into. So, really linking in with our media team to support us in that area and relying on, people who have got much better knowledge. I've got an X account. I very rarely use it. I've got an Instagram account, but much further than that, my two children that have got all these different platforms, and they come up with a new platform every day. And Nick's right. I argue with them all the time, saying, "No, you can't have that. You can't go on that," purely because I probably don't know what it is or what it's going through. So the education is massive, and I think it's always going to be one that is going to be a challenge for all of us as we progress and as we move forward.
Yeah, massively. Have the kids themselves changed over the years, Nick, or are they still basically the same and we're just panicking about the influences upon them?
The influence upon them have changed. Kids are fundamentally always the same, aren't they? So they get to that 12 to 15, teenage brain kicks in. They're more interested in what the mates think than what they think the coach thinks. When they're younger, they generally want to impress the coach and they'll copy and follow. So all those basic psychological things that have always been there are there. It's just the number of influences, and that is a huge change. The days of just being able to tell a kid what to do and they'll they kind of go and do it. They're just gone. You have to spend a lot of time, which is a good thing, by the way. This is a very positive change, I think, in terms of coaches. And I use the word coaches not just as technical coaches, as like on-field coaches. I think the psychologist is a coach. The lady who is serving the food, or the fella who's cleaning the chip, they're all coaches because they're all interacting with the kids. Their behaviours are really, really important. It's just those number of influences that have definitely changed, and the need to now engage with the kids first. So really get to know them. So we have something called the Sun Rule. So basically, we've all got kids, and I think if we're good parents, our kids will argue with us. They might not agree with us, but they'll know at the end of the day we've got their back and that we want the best for them, and therefore that allows us to do certain things with them. If you can try and forge that relationship with your players, then you're in a good place. And you have to earn the right, I think, to coach a lot more now than you used to do.
But the coaching changed as well then, Chris? The way you teach these kids, or is that still fundamentally the same?
I think it's a mix. I think you have to evolve. You have to adapt. And I think probably one of the big changes in kind of, youth development is around kind of the coach education and, probably the way that the children and the young players learn now is probably slightly different from what it was previously. They want to take on more ownership. They thrive off having the ability to make more decisions themselves rather than relying on the coach to give them the answers. And you go from start here and then run there and make that diagonal pass and then get yourself back into this position. They want to explore that and try and get to those bits more than themselves. And I think the way that you then teach that has developed and changed. So the way we interact and the way that you build the relationships becomes very individualized and very personalized. What Nick might need from me as a coach, I might be a little bit more forceful with him, and I might tell him. Whereas yourself, Matt, it might be a lot more where I'm going to ask you questions that pose you to go and solve the problems. And I don't think there's a right or a wrong way of doing it. It's about knowing your players and how do you get the best out of your players at that time and how they learn, but also in terms of what they need at that given time. If I was teaching you a new skill or something for the very first time, you may deliver that in a slightly different way than if you've done it repetitively over a number of seasons, a number of years. So I think there's definitely the way you teach and how you become and really get to build those relationships with your players and the individuals. That's crucial. That's massive.
It's important to know, Matt, that these are kind of general trends. So there've always been players that have needed a different approach. I watch. Sometimes we'll still bump into Andy Reid, and I look at the relationship he had, and Andy, with Paul, and he would be one of those players where you don't tell Andy Reid what to do. Just go and do this, and he's going to do it. There's just the general trend is more exactly the direction Chris has spoken about. Now, a lot of the better players in the past would still not just going to do what you say. You'd still have to form that relationship. But I think a lot of the other kids would be much more, I'm just going to go and do it. Whereas now the general trend is towards much more players like not to the extreme Reedy was. And I'm sure he won't mind me saying that.
He's listening in, Nick. He's next door.
That's fine. Every time I see him, I say the same thing. How are you coaching? Flipping out. Because he was not easy. He was not easy to coach. But what a good footballer and what an intelligent lad, and he's done brilliant. And that doesn't surprise me, by the way. That doesn't surprise me. There's just more like him. It's a trend, I think, towards having to be more individual. Because Chris is absolutely spot on. That is the key now. Teaching a bunch of kids as if they're just a group, with the odd one that is a little bit different. Yeah, that they're all different. And they were all different then. It's just that what they were exposed to and the influences outside and how society was meant. Perhaps it was more regimented is not the right word, but they were more probably compliant with a way of doing things than they are now.
So is Ryan Yates the dream? That's probably an open question to either of you. Is Ryan Yates the dream, or does it not matter how the kid is? I assume Ryan Yates was an absolute perfect role model in the academy, but do you not necessarily want 20 Ryan Yateses in a group then, Chris?
I think if you got 20 Ryan Yateses, that's a pretty good start, isn't it? No, I think obviously, but Ryan's been fantastic, and even to this day, he epitomizes everything that you'd want him to be and for him to act, and the way he conducts himself on and off the pitch. The reality is that everyone comes with a different personality. Everybody comes with a different background and a way of living, and who's to say that one is better than the other? That I think that's the skill of developers and people in youth development, where you embrace it all. It's a story I was telling. This is from years ago before I was at Nottingham Forest, and I had a coach who struggled with one lad. He'd bring the group in for 30 seconds, 45 seconds to introduce something, and there was always a boy at the back bouncing the ball, and it used to really annoy the coach, and he used to get really frustrated that he was bouncing the ball, and he always used to think, well, he's not listening, he's not taking in the information. And I remember saying to him, just ask him a question off of what you've gone through and what you said. And he did it one session, and the boy gave him a perfect answer, but he spent the last 30 seconds, 45 seconds bouncing the ball, sorry. And the coach thought that he wasn't listening, but that was the way that he engaged, and he was taking in the information. So it's sometimes our perceptions can lead you down the wrong route. So it's about challenging that, and it's about finding all the different individuals and how they learn and how they tick. Of course, you don't want them to be disruptive. You don't want them to disrupt other people's learning, but I'm going to learn in a different way to perhaps the next person. And then that's the art of the coach, to develop them as they go through the journey, that, when they get into that first team. And we're obviously lucky enough to have, we work in at clubs where we've got players from the academy into the first team. You want them to be at a point where they're representing themselves, their families, the club in the right way each and every single day. But their route to get there, and in youth development, they're going to make loads of mistakes on the way, and it's part of our responsibility to help them and guide them along that journey. So when they get to that point, and they're playing in front of 30, 40,000 fans every single week, they're representing the club and the supporters and everyone, all of the values that everybody wants to see in the right way.
How difficult is it as well, Nick, that in the first team everyone's competing for one goal to win the game for the team? Is it different in academy football in that, yes, you're trying to win games, but also all these lads are probably competing with each other. They're being assessed all the time. And I don't know if they realistically know, but a very small percentage of them are going to either make it in the game or certainly make it in the Liverpool/Forest first team. How much of a challenge is that for you guys?
All you can be is honest with the players. That's all you can be, and the parents. And sometimes they'll appreciate it. Sometimes they'll very quickly forget what you've said. But all you can be is honest. The vast majority aren't going to make it as footballers. It's just simple mathematics, isn't it? There's 220 players playing in the Premier League every week. Starting the Premier League, there's about 345 million registered footballers in the world. So it's pretty difficult. So you can give them those statistics, and obviously, as I'm sure happens at Forest, you just talk about being the best you can be. I mean, it's interesting because Ryan Yates is probably as good an example of a player I've ever seen. And obviously, I only saw him through to 14. That you can probably turn around and go, that kid has made the most of everything. What an unbelievable example he is. Speaking to Michael Dawson about him a few weeks ago, Michael was up with his boys at Leeds. Had a really good chat because he was there as, I think, Ryan just started to break through. Had a good chat about him and what he saw at Ryan at that time. And he would echo the words of somebody who's absolutely achieved his maximum. And that is really what we would try and speak to the boys around, which is, come on, be as good as you possibly can be. You might need a bit of good fortune on the way. You might need an opportunity that comes because of an injury or whatever. But be ready for it by being as good as you possibly can be. And the best ones tend to do that. And they might need a bit of help along the way. They might need some nudging and some prodding and to keep them on that path. That's the goal of academies. That's what we're here to do, and we can kind of look ourselves in the mirror if we think we've done our part of that. If the boy's done his part as well, great, and somebody else hasn't, then we can still look ourselves in the mirror and sleep at night. If we haven't, then that's when it becomes a little bit difficult for us, and we have to reflect.
Yeah, but I think as well, it's how do you measure success of an academy, and ultimately you want players to go and progress into your first team. As Nick alluded to there, the reality are we know that not every boy in our academy and either our academies are going to go and represent our first teams, but can we go and help them if they don't achieve that? We unfortunately don't get to that point. Go and help them achieve that either somewhere else, or they leave having had some lifelong experiences and some unbelievable moments that helps them progress, whatever that might be. And if somebody then doesn't quite make it as a footballer, but goes on to have a really successful career as an accountant or open up their own business and do really, really well, then that success off the back of the program that they've been in. Of course, it's not the main focus of what we're trying to do and what they're trying to achieve, but it's also another measurement of how successful your program has been, even though we're all here every single day working as hard as we can with the boys and the staff, is to develop as many players to go and play in our first team.
I'll pick up on that shortly. This is a specific one on Ryan Yates, Nick, and it probably speaks to a wider question. What did you make of 13, 14-year-old Ryan Yates? Could you see something in him? And also, I suppose this follow-up is, at what point can you see something in an individual young lad?
To be really honest, did I see Ryan playing and captaining a team that's going to hopefully be in the Champions League next year at 13 and 14? No. But, you know, I might mention this in a previous podcast. It's very hard at that age. It's very hard. So we did something 7 or 8 years ago. Steve Highway was in, and we had a few other people along with myself and Alex as academy director, had been in the game a long time. It's like, go on, who did you know at 14 was going to be top? And actually, we couldn't really come up with many names. The only name that really came up was Steve and Michael Owen. I remember Steve's had Stephen Gerrard and Robbie Fowler, Jamie Carragher, Steve McMahon. You know, he's seen some unbelievable players, but the only player he knew at that age that was going to be, in his words, like a top player was Michael Owen. So I do think it's hard. What I think you could say about something like Ryan, which is why they're always going to be coaches like favourites, coaches' dreams, people like him, is that you knew he was going to achieve his potential unless he got something really unlucky like an injury. He was going to get to be as good as he could be. So I think we're pretty confident of that at that age. But yeah, if you'd have said to me, like, yeah, he's going to be doing what he's doing now, I would have said it's more unlikely. And again, that's just maths. Of course, it's unlikely. It's incredibly difficult what he's done, which is why he deserves unbelievable credit. If you look at his journey at the club, his journey on loan, I mean, flipping heck, he's an example to every boy at Forest Academy about, come on, this is what you've got to be about. You know, an unbelievable story, really.
So how hard is it to know when to let someone go then, Chris? Because players progress at different rates. You know, they can bloom at 14, 15, 16. Do you know when to say, actually, we're going to have to let you go and really break the dreams of a young lad? How do you come to that decision?
It's the hardest. Sorry, Matt. It's the hardest part of it. It's the hardest part. You know, when you sat with as a group of staff, and you know you're looking at the players and trying to decide in terms of actually which ones continue and which ones you want to progress. And sometimes it's you do it for the right reasons. Sometimes if you know that actually a player's pathway, you know, and that route from under 18s into your B team, into your first team, maybe isn't there for them, but actually could open up elsewhere. Having that honest conversation with them at that point and saying, look, you know, you've got so many attributes and we do believe that you're going to go and have a real successful career, but it might not be here at Nottingham Forest and we want to try and unlock that elsewhere. Sometimes that's the best route for a player to go in. You draw back on your experiences, and you know, I think especially for me is what's really important is you don't make it anybody, you know, one person's decision, and you don't rely on one person, and that, you know, you draw on everybody's knowledge of experience around the football club and the key people across the academy and that transitional space in that. You know, through to the first team and the first team staff to make the best informed decision that you can for that player, and you do it with the best intentions. But it's the, you know, that point of exiting and progression is the most difficult part and the most difficult decision that you have to make in our roles, I believe.
Same process at Liverpool, Nick.
Yeah, but we all pride ourselves on what we do and like to see success stories. But ultimately, the biggest indicator of somebody being successful in football is opportunity. So you can be the best coach or the best academy. If players don't get the opportunity to progress by the pathway that Chris was speaking about, you ain't going to be a footballer. You're not going to be a footballer sat on a bench watching other people play. It's simple. You've got to go and practice it. It's the same in any walk of life. You don't get to be a top concert violinist by never playing any concerts. So for me, and it's actually quite simple. You can make poor decisions about who's going to be, in your opinion, the group's opinion, have the potential to play at the highest level. But ultimately, if you let a player go because you know that he's not going to get the games program he needs at your football club, you're not making the wrong decision. He might come back and bite you on the backside later on by being somewhere else. I still don't think you made the wrong decision. So the classic story that I got hammered with for 5 or 10 years at Forest was Sean Wright-Phillips.
I was going to mention that.
Classic story, and I remember that vividly. And I can't go into too much detail about what that discussion was. Sean left us. We didn't take him. He went to Manchester City and got sold for 30-odd million. That's in the 90s. So that's 100 million now. Okay. One of the reasons why was Reedy. We had a player who played in this similar position that we thought we really liked and really went on to be a really good player. So was that a poor decision? Maybe. But he would not have had the career he had if he was sat on our bench, not playing football. And there are many, many players here. So Lambert come back and play for England. He came and played for our first team. He got released here at under 14. So as long as we can sit in front of kids and we know that we're making the right decision in terms of who's got the most potential, because the younger they are, the harder it is to know what's ahead. But you can definitely make the right decision about, we'd all love to sit in front of parents and have a lovely conversation and be the nice guy who says you've got another year or another 2 years. And then 2 years later or a year later, they sat in front of you and you're letting them go and they're saying, well, I would have been playing half a game every week. How do you expect my son to be as good as he possibly can be? And they're right. So I think as long as you're providing boys the opportunity, either with your club or another football club, to go on and be as good as they can be, you're making the right decision.
All right for this. Yeah, that's the one that's always thrown around by Forest fans. But yeah, is that just something you have to, I don't know, put out the back of your mind as well then, Nick? I don't know if it's fear the right word, but you might be wrong. But as Nick says, if the process is right, you can't be wrong in a way.
I don't think you can be fearful, because if you're fearful, you don't make good decisions because you're making decisions in fear. You have to make decisions that are honest and that are around what you as a group think. And we're very honest with our kids. We could be wrong, but what we're going to do is we're going to work our absolute socks off to make sure you get the next move to another club where your opportunities are better. And we'll show some statistics that we're. And it's looking likely that Forest will be in this position next year, which would be fantastic. But we're trying to create players who can play in the Champions League, and our data department have done a big study of players who play for top clubs that can potentially win the Champions League. And in each position, they have made their debut on average between 18 and 19. Some positions even a little bit early. They played first team football before then. The level of first team football isn't actually that important. They just got to play men's football. So Ryan's another good example. Like, obviously, the loans he had that got him there. Harry Kane, the loans he had that got him there. For us at the moment, I guess Conor Bradley and Jarell Quansah, the loans that they had to get him there. Opportunity was created that allowed them to then go and achieve the level they have to get to and play men's football by a certain age. There are some exceptions to that, which are the really latent physical developers. So, if you don't make your debut by that, it's not like you can't do it. It just becomes a lot harder. So if the opportunity to go to another football club and do a Wes Morgan and literally play local men's football and get picked up by us at 17 and then go on and play in the Champions League and lift a trophy as the Premier League as captain of Leicester, having played 300 games for Forest, who's to know that if that kid had stayed at the club he was at the time, we released him at 15, he would have had the same career. You just don't know. But what we do know is that opportunity is key. It's more important than the staff that are around them, more important than the facilities of the club. They have to have the opportunity to progress. And if you don't get that, they will stall, and virtually all of those players will not make it.
Chris Brass was on here, Chris, and I'm sure he spoke about that as well, around data and debuts, and that goes into loans, I guess. But is that something you guys must be conscious of at Forest then as well?
Yeah, absolutely. We similar to what Nick alluded to there in terms of data has become a big part of what we do now, and making it really individualized and shaping. And there are different routes. We mentioned Ryan's routes there with the loans. Brennan had a season at Lincoln a few years ago, and there are players that, probably more of the exception to the rule, that go straight into a first team and never go out on a loan. But you do look at it, and you do look at that exposure to senior football. We're going into quite a bit of depth around, our loans and how we select our loans, and the types of clubs and the players and the managers, not only in England but further afield as well. Because Nick makes a really good point of opportunity, that having an opportunity for players to progress at the right time and put them into uncomfortable and challenging environments massively accelerates their progression. It's sometimes the bits that they don't want to do, and you don't want to take them out of their comfort zones too soon or too early. But very much you use the data to help inform your decisions. We don't use it as the be all and end all, so we don't go off everything that the data tells us, but it definitely helps us engage in conversation and shape it for certain.
There's one other topic area I want to just touch on in the last 5 or 10 minutes with these gents, but just quickly, the second advert today. Thank you very much to Vesta Blind. You get a bit of everything advert-wise on here. So if you're looking for new curtains or blinds, not curtains, blinds or shutters, check that out. Link is in the description. So thanks to them for that. You can tell I'm really good at these ad reads, can't you? The other thing I wanted to ask was, just in terms of sort of pressure, I mean, this is pressure on you guys as the people who are running the academy, especially Chris. Like, Evangelos Marinakis is going to say, I've pumped in a lot of money and a lot of resources, and he's probably going to expect first team players to come through. And obviously Chris as well. Forest got this hugely proud tradition, which I'm sure you guys are massively aware of, around players in the squad going back to the first team squad, going back to the 40s. So how do you yourself and the staff deal with that weight of expectation, or can you not even think about it?
I think you, whether pressure is the right word, you want to do what's right by the kids and by the players and by the club you're working for. We know that, when we, on any given day here, you've got 150, 160 players, young lads coming in to train with them. We want to give them the best environment. We want to give them the best program, to give them every opportunity to progress forward and move forward. That alone is kind of the pressure we put under ourselves, to make sure that every day they come in, they're going to leave a better person and better for the experience of coming into training, or a life skills session, or an analysis session. But of course, there's no better feeling when players that you've had, a small part to play in, and they end up going and doing very well in your first team and having a career. It's fantastic to see the opportunities that, and the experiences that they've had have helped shape them to get where they want to get to. But in terms of, I speak from our side, incredibly well supported from our owner, from our ownership, to towards the academy and developing our program and moving it forward. And we're working really hard to make sure that, there's a Brennan, there's a Ryan, there's the next group of players that get that opportunity to go and, step out of the city ground, hopefully as we progress further into, more competitions, and hopefully into the Champions League next year, that our young players and local players get that opportunity. It's massive for us.
And the same for you, Nick. Obviously, you've had Trent Alexander-Arnold, Jarrell Quansah, Curtis Jones. I don't know if Conor Bradley counts. I'm not sure where he was signed from, but the pressure on you guys from the ownership and the fans to keep producing. How do you deal with that?
Well, look, long short of it is, if you're not doing that, I guess you're out of a job, aren't you? The club will invest a lot of money in an academy, and if the academy's not producing players, then you're probably going to end up losing your job at some point. What you have to understand is when you work in the academy, and certainly how I judge myself on, that's just noise in the background. You want to obviously do well for your employers, and we're very fortunate. Like Chris, we've been really well supported. We've got people who really get development. We've been very lucky with our managers as well, as we continue to be. So we recognise that bit, but ultimately the pressure has to come from yourself. you have to live the same journey as you're saying to the players. So that, you know, the players be as good as you can possibly be. Staff, you've got to be as good as you possibly can be. So again, I can go to bed at night if I think I've done as well as I can do. I'll still make mistakes. We'll still make mistakes. But if we've done as well as we can do, we can't control the things that are beyond our control. So, you know, if we haven't had this, but if we have a manager who decides he doesn't want to play any kids, then we could run an unbelievable academy doing all the right things. We won't produce any. There won't be players in the first team. You know, I was very fortunate with a lot of the managers at Forest, but some managers didn't have that priority, which is fine. You know, they've got to get up and win promotion or do as well as they possibly can be, and you just got to take that on the chin. If you judge yourself by that metric, you've got a problem, because you can judge yourself as being brilliant when you're not brilliant at all. You've just been very fortunate that a manager's come in and he's got a lot of injuries, or the club's in trouble and hasn't got any money and puts the kids in. And you can think you're doing brilliant, and other times you can actually think you're horrific because there's no players getting in, and your first team's absolutely flying, everybody's fit. What manager's going to replace a team that's doing really well with young players? You've got to find another route through. So I think the important thing for us who work in development is to obviously appreciate the support we get from managers and owners and technical directors and stuff. But it's really important that, because they're key. But in terms of what we judge ourselves on, we've got to judge ourselves on how well we think we're doing the job. Are we giving it everything we possibly can be? And are we reflecting on the tough times and the good times with kind of the right compass, and not judging ourselves too harshly or patting ourselves on the back when actually we could do things a lot better. So I think often, I'm not saying ourselves, just judging ourselves, but as a group of people, being really kind of, which is what Paul was brilliant at Forest, by the way. You know, this could be going great, and you're in his office getting a shellacking because they think she could be better at something else, and he was right. I learned that lesson very quickly. So that's really, really important, because ultimately the success of the first team we're not daft, is the most important thing for a football club. We're just a part of that. So we have to look at, are we doing our part of that as well as we can do?
I don't think Billy Davies is going to be Liverpool manager anytime soon. So you're probably all right for getting players, still getting chances, hopefully. And
by the way, you're please saying that, so I give Billy a bit of stick, and I'm not going to, because Billy was trying to get promotion, and Billy still put some young players in. We'll use Wes a lot. He gave Brendan Maloney a go. So at different times, I understand the pressure on managers to do certain things. I get it. You know, it's just managers got really tough jobs.
We're just running out of time, surely. I've got to let these chaps go. Any message, Chris, that you would convey to fans about the work you do? Anything you'd want them to understand, that people like, you know, myself included as well, obviously, that might be interested in, that you want to convey?
I'll just say, I think, you know, in terms of the talent and what's building across the entire football club at the minute is really exciting. I think everybody, probably from supporters, can see, you know, how well the first team and how much the club has moved forward in, you know, in terms of the work that's going on behind the scenes in the academy and across the board. You know, the future is really, really exciting. We've got some fantastic young players that are coming through, and, you know, we're really hoping over the next few years that, you know, they then go and cement themselves as, you know, regular first team players. And at this moment in time, it's, you know, fantastic to be a part of. I know I feel very privileged and very fortunate to be part of this journey and trying to help shape the younger players now moving forward. But you know, enjoy it. You know, it's fantastic to be part of this, and, you know, in terms of where we're at, and hopefully they'll, you know, have more of the Ryans of the world coming through the academy over the next few years for them to be proud of.
Hopefully so. There's lots more I could ask about the direction of travel of it all, but maybe we'll do that another time, because I do really enjoy speaking to both these chaps. If you've enjoyed this, do us a favour, hit like, hit subscribe, do consider membership or Patreon. You'll get early access to anything like this that's pre-recorded, or just give us a lovely 5-star review. A quick question for what's the rest of your day look like, Nick, then? I'm just out of curiosity. Is it all meetings, or do you ever get on the grass or not?
No, I'm very, very fortunate in that part of my role is also head of coaching for the kind of YDP phase. So I have opportunities to get on the grass. I will be on the grass tonight. I have a a difficult conversation later on with a young lad who I really, really like and a dad I really, really like, which I wouldn't say I'm massively looking forward to, but along the lines of everything we've spoken about earlier on, has to be done, and that's part of the job. And sometimes trying to get across to people like that actually can really rate their kid and really like them, and you're trying to do the best for them is a challenge that is a good one. So I've got an interesting rest of the day. So I've got that, and then I'll be out with our under 12s and 13s.
What about you, Chris? Do you ever get on the grass, or are you stuck in meetings all day?
A bit of a mix today, Matt, to be fair. I've got a couple of intermediary phone calls to make this afternoon. Meeting with a director of footballer from another club. He's coming across shortly just to talk through some potential partnerships and moving forward. And then as soon as the evening hits, the laptop and the phone goes away and down, and you very much get around the groups, you get around the players. So not coaching tonight, so I'll take on a more of an observational point of view. But yeah, no, as soon as there's nothing better once the players are in. That's the best part of the day. You get around them, you get around the training sessions, and you get around the games, and you can put that laptop down. It's the best part of the day.
Lovely stuff. So really grateful for everything we've learned today. Thanks to Nick. Thanks to Chris. Hope you enjoyed this. Like I say, we'll be back. I'm not sure when we'll be back because when this comes out, I'm away. But we'll be back certainly around the Spurs game. So do check that out. But in the meantime, have a good day. And if we don't see you then, we shall see you soon.